Hello, beautiful souls, and welcome back to another episode of the Path of Wellness podcast. I'm your host, Nicole, and this is another rendition of Wellness Wednesday. This is my weekly feature on the show where I pick a topic and kind of discuss something that I personally am doing to help keep myself well. So this is just a peek behind the curtain at what an acupuncturist shaman does as part of her wellness routine to thrive in the modern world. Today is Wednesday, August 30th. I almost said September. I was looking at the date and it said 8, and for some reason I get 8 and 9 for the months confused. So I almost said September. But it is August, Wednesday, August 30th. Happy end of the month. And today is extra special because it is a full moon tonight. And it's extra special, not just because it's a full moon, but because it's a super moon, which means the moon is physically closer to the earth than it is at other periods during the year. But it's also a blue moon. And a blue moon is when you have two full moons in the same month. So we had another full moon. I think it was like August 1st or August 2nd, somewhere around there. I've already forgotten the date, but this is the second full moon of August. And if you've ever heard that phrase, once in a blue moon, what that phrase means is something that doesn't happen very often, something that only happens once in a while. It makes it special. And that's what makes a blue moon special. They don't happen very often. In fact, I think this is the only blue moon of all of 2023. And we might have one or two next year as well. I haven't looked that far ahead at the moon calendar. But either way, a blue moon and a super moon on the same night is extra special. So today for Wellness Wednesday, what I wanted to go into detail about was celebrating the moon cycles. This can be applicable for women because, we have cycles, whether we're still menstruating or not. We still are very much in harmony with the moon. But this is also important to men too. Like, men are not exempt from the effects of the moon. It impacts all of us. And I have found that having a practice where I celebrate the moon phases, or at the very least, am very aware of them and where the moon is and what's happening with the moon at any given moment, it helps me to feel connected. It helps me to feel like I am actually part of the whole and like I'm not just alone and floundering in a sea of chaos. I'm going to do an episode about this coming up soon, like a full-length episode where I discuss my journey with anxiety. It's actually what led me to the discovery of acupuncture and why I became an acupuncturist. But I have struggled with anxiety for a big chunk of my life. I've got it much, much, much more under control now. It's really rare when I get anxiety now. And if I do, it makes sense. Like, it's situational. But one thing that I noticed about anxiety when I was able to reflect back about it is that feeling cut off from source and just disconnected from everything, feeling disconnected from people, disconnected from the spirit world, disconnected from the planet, from nature, just disconnect was a really, really big trigger, a really big cause of my anxiety. And because I work with people in my practice who have anxiety as well, this is a common theme that I see. It's not just me. A lot of people have the same issue. Sometimes they can't put words to this, like they wouldn't word it the way that I just worded it, but the way they describe things to me, it's clear to me that that's what they're getting at, is that they feel a disconnect from nature, from themselves, from the cycles. And I've talked about this in other episodes. I feel like this is the problem of the 21st century for people, is like mental health and feeling disconnected. I mean, we saw this during COVID with the lockdowns and, being told that it was not safe to hug your family or your friends, to not be able to go see your grandparents or go visit, like being unable to visit family that or friends that were in the hospital. And what happened during that time? Anxiety and depression and suicide skyrocketed. Like, this was not a coincidence. People are meant to be social. We're meant to be connected to each other and to the spirit world and to the planet. We're just meant to be connected. And one of my biggest goals in life and for the work that I do is to get people to, one, to remember that, and two, to actually do this, to actually get connected again to each other, to the planet, to the spirit world, to the whole, because I think it's going to solve a whole heck of a lot of the mental and emotional neurodivergent issues that we see today. And I think one of the easiest ways to start doing this is to sync up with the moon. And this, you don't have to do anything fancy. You can literally just go on your phone and look at a moon chart. You can look at when where the moon is in the cycle of its evolution. So I'm going to kind of just give a brief rundown of, like, for those who don't know, of the moon cycle, just for reference of what I'm talking about here. A moon cycle, much like a woman's menstrual cycle, follows a 28 to 29 day period of time. And we start with, I guess it doesn't really matter where you start because it's all a cycle. So there is no beginning or end. But because tonight is the full moon, how about we just start here? So tonight is the full moon. So that is where we see the moon at its peak. Like, we see the whole thing. It completely lights up the sky. It looks like just a giant spotlight, a brilliant spotlight. And then once we are past the full moon, then the moon begins to wane. And this is a period of time where the moon begins to get smaller and smaller in the sky until it's a crescent. And it also like the time when the moon rises is different. Like, it's half an hour later every night or morning, depending on where you are in the cycle. For the full moon, it rises pretty much right after the sun goes down. So the sun goes down, moon rises, and it's full, and it tracks across the sky. And then the next night when it rises, it's about half an hour later and it's a little bit smaller. And then the next night it's half an hour later and it's a little bit smaller, until eventually we have a crescent moon. That's the waning moon. And then we have the new moon, or the dark moon. And so that is when you can't see the moon at all. Or if you can, it's just, you can see like a black circle outline of the moon. That's the new moon. And that happens about halfway. That's like halfway in the cycle. So the full moon and the new moon are like halfway points. They're about 2 weeks apart in this whole 28-day cycle. And the new moon rises in the morning. So like it kind of comes up with the sun. So you really can't see the new moon a lot of the time. And if you can, it'll really just be like an outline of it. And then after that, the moon begins to wax. And that's where it, starts to show up more and more. It becomes a crescent, and then it becomes the first quarter moon, which is when it looks like a half circle. And then it gets bigger and bigger. They call that the waxing gibbous moon, until it's full again. And that's a full 28 to 29 day cycle. That's the moon cycle. And, women, we menstruate. We follow a similar cycle. Whether or not we're synced up with the moon exactly, we still have similar cycles, that follow that path, the 28 to 29 day pathway. A lot of women have, hormone issues, wonky cycles. something that can be really helpful for getting women who aren't on hormones and who aren't like tampering with their cycle to better sync up with the moon is to simply follow the moon. You track it, you know exactly where it is at any given moment, and you try to get outside every day and see, like actually look up in the sky and see if you can see the moon. There's I don't know if there's studies about this, but there's definitely anecdotal evidence that for women who do this for 28 days, they go outside, they look at the moon every single day for 28 days, their menstrual cycles will sync up with it, and it will help to regulate their hormones, which is really cool. And I have found that when people track the moon, whether or not they do it every single day or they just kind of know where the full moon and the new moon are in the cycle, and they do something to either celebrate that, the passage of time with the waxing and the waning of the moon, whether they celebrate it or they just acknowledge it, I find that it helps the anxiety issue. Like it helps make people feel more connected and more in touch with their own bodies and just, more in touch with everything around them. And when we get into the more spiritual aspect of this, the moon can aid in a lot of things. Like it can help increase your intuition. It can help with retention of dreams or even lucid dreaming if that's something you wanted to try to pursue. It can kind of tap you into like the magic and the mystery of life. And I feel like that piece right there, the magic and the mystery, that's what's missing from modern society. And I think really at its heart, that's the problem. Like that's why so many people have anxiety and depression, is because they're cut off from the magic. And so just following the moon cycle is a really, really good way to remember the magic of the world around you, the magic within. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, the moon affects all of us. And the full moon in particular affects all of us. I think it's pretty much unanimous, whether or not people are into witchy or spiritual things or not. Most people can agree that the full moon impacts people. There is documented evidence for this. When full moons happen, the emergency rooms in hospitals are busier. And I mean, it kind of makes sense. The moon affects the tides. Like it makes the tides of the oceans come and go, high tide, low tide. It's all impacted by the moon. And well, I guess it would only make sense that it would impact people as well, because we're 70 some percent water. I think it only makes sense that the moon would impact us because it impacts the oceans, like these huge bodies of water that cover our whole planet. I think it absolutely makes sense that the moon would impact people as well. And for that reason, I think it's even more important that people acknowledge the full moon. At the very least, the full moon. If you can track the whole 28-day moon cycle, I think it would really set you up on the path of success, especially if you deal with anxiety or depression and you feel like you just need to be connected to source or to something bigger than yourself. This is a really simple way to do it. And it's also really easy because you can go outside and you can just look at it. You can see it with your own eyes as it, the moon gets bigger and then it gets smaller and then it disappears and then it starts to get bigger again and then it's full. It's there for you to see with your own eyes, which is, I think, important for some people, some people who might be a little more skeptical about the spirit world or things that they can't see. You can see the moon, like it's undeniably there. So what does a moon practice look like? Well, for me, I kind of plan them out. So the cool thing about tracking the moon is that you can easily just go online and look it up. Like it's already mapped out for I'm sure you can find moon cycles for like years and years in advance. So that's the cool thing about it. Kind of like the dates on the calendar, like when Christmas is going to be next year, or you know when certain dates are going to be because somebody already tracked it for you. So all you really need to do is just find a moon calendar, see at the very least when the full moon is going to be, and probably when the new moon is going to be as well. And you could just make a note on your calendar or put up an alert on your phone or something to remind you, hey, I need to go outside and look at the moon at this point in time, just to help make me feel more connected. It can be as simple as that, like, oh, it's a full moon tonight. I need to make sure I go outside and just look at it for a few minutes. Or, hey, it's going to be a new moon this morning. I'm going to try to wake up with the sunrise and just kind of feel the newness, like the new manifesting rising energy that comes with the new moon. It can be as simple as that. You can also do it as elaborately as you want. You can create rituals to do around the full moon and the new moon. You can do rituals for the quarter moons, for the quarter waxing moon and the quarter waning moon. Actually, I'm sorry, it's the 3/4 moon when it's waning. You can do something for literally every day in the moon cycle if you're feeling called to do it. Or you can just go outside, like make a note in the moon calendars when the moon is going to be up in the sky so that you can go outside and just look at it for a few minutes. There's so many different ways you can go about it. And it doesn't have to be complicated unless you want it to be. In which case, I just recommend that you plan it in advance so that you're not rushing around at the last minute trying to figure out what you're going to do for your full moon ceremony that you didn't plan. I'm guilty of that, by the way. So that's all it needs to be. It can be something totally simple. But since this is a blue moon, which don't happen very often, for me personally, I've definitely got stuff that I have planned for tonight's new moon, or full moon, full blue moon. Talking about the moon so much, it's all jumbling together. Words. I've definitely got some stuff planned for the blue moon tonight because it's a rare moon and I feel like I want to capture the energy of this particular moon. So I'm going to be making some moon water, which is really just, I put water in a jar. I might put a couple of stones in there as well. And I charge it up under the full moon, under the blue full moon, and I set an intention with it. And this is water that I can then drink, or I can also use it on my clients in the work that I do. Like I could spritz it on them. It'll just help to enhance the treatment. I've got a couple of different things that I'm going to be doing, like things that I don't do very often because we don't have a blue moon very often. So I'm going to harness the energy of this particular moon. That's just an example of like what you can do to help celebrate the moon and just the ever-changing cycle of nature. For reference, there's a really good website called foreverconscious.com. I'll put a link to it in the show notes. They do a really good job at giving you ideas for little rituals that you can do for all of the moon cycles. Mostly for the full moon and the new moons, and it's always timely. It's like, here's what you can do for like tonight, like for tonight's full blue supermoon. And that's a really good resource. They usually have like a little meditation that you do, and then just some sort of a ritual that encompasses the astrology of the season and that particular moon. That's a really good resource. There's also moon journals that you can use that help with this as well. One is Moonology. It's by Yasmin Boland, I think is how you pronounce her name. That one's pretty good. I've been using a different one lately. It's called like the Annual Lunar Planner. I cannot remember the exact name of it. I will figure it out and I'll put it in the show notes. I like this one because it tracks, it's more open and like it does track the moon, like the big ones, but it also tracks the seasons, which I really like. And it gives you like cool rituals to do at the beginning of every month and a deity to work with for that particular month. So that's the one that I've been working with. Anyways, the point is there's a lot that you can do and there's resources available. So if you're feeling called to celebrate the moons, especially the big ones, here's my invitation to you. Just start doing it. Just put it in your calendar, like look up the moons, put them in your calendar, and make it a point to just at least go outside and look at the moon, or light a candle, or say a prayer, or do something more elaborate than that. Whatever it is, I hope that it helps to make you feel more connected to the mystery and the magic of everything, because that's what it's done for me. And it has helped drastically with anxiety and helping me to feel more connected. So that is what I'm doing for tonight's Wellness Wednesday. Thank you so much for listening, and I will catch you guys in the next